welcome to the latest edition of the Bison Video Blog, quarterfinal edition. Along with Jeff Kolpack, I'm Dom Izzo, as we're down to the final 8 teams left for the FCS Championship. North Dakota State will have another rematch as we do it again here in 2015 with the University of Northern Iowa. The Panthers coming to town, winners of 7 consecutive games after they dusted Portland State on the road late Saturday night. The last time we saw UNI, this was a battered football team that was just finishing up a gauntlet of 5 hard games to start the season. They proceeded to lose the next week as well at Western Illinois. But that's the last time this Panther team has lost, Jeff. They have really found something with Aaron Bailey at quarterback.
Well, they have, and they've scored at such an impressive clip. I mean, look at the scores in that streak: 59, 41, 49 points, 53, and then 29 against a pretty good Portland State defense. And Aaron Bailey is going to be a task. That guy's huge. He's like 6'2" and 225. And did you see him, the way he outran the Portland State secondary on a couple of occasions?
Yeah, he was fantastic. You're looking at highlights of the first game this season, which we'll get into now, which was a instant classic that the Bison, boy, what a fourth quarter this was. They ended up winning it 31-28 on a homecoming, so it was already going to be juiced for this game. But this was something that had not happened prior to this point. It was Carson Wentz had not thrown an interception until that guy did it. Number 24 is a guy that NDSU is going to have to know where he's on the football field, and that's Tim Kilfoy, who's picked off Wentz each of the last 2 seasons.
And the one last year was a big play in the Northern Iowa win in Cedar Falls. And we'll see if Carson Wentz is going to play this week.
Because now that's the added curveball, and as Chris Kleiman has said, that Wentz is going to practice this week. His status is dependent on how he progresses through the week. Smoke screen, or do we actually see number 11 play on Saturday?
Boy, I got to believe, considering his future and the possibilities down the line, if he plays, it's going to have to be 100%.
Yep.
I don't think he does. I just don't think you can. Northern Iowa is a physical team, and you need to have that dual threat capability. Right now, it's one thing to throw a 10-yard out.
Right.
And we saw him throw a 10-yard pass before the game on Saturday.
We did.
But it's another deal facing somebody like McMakin and Ailes and all these guys that can just lay the load on you.
Yeah, and that's what makes this so interesting is Kleiman trying to throw a smoke screen and his whole buddy and Mark Farley to say maybe you have to prepare for Carson Wentz as well, because Wentz had such a great game the first time out when they played UNI.
Well, there's no doubt that at the least that's got to be part of the reason. At the least, absolutely, because coaches just love to play that game. Look at the Montana coach. You never know if anybody's hurt or not. A guy breaks his arm and he calls him day-to-day. Come on.
Now, Northern Iowa comes in. I mentioned this, and Big E gave me grief on it, Jeff, but I think they are the hottest team going. Granted, NDSU's won 6 straight as well, but Northern Iowa has played 5 top 10 teams this year. They're 7-2 against ranked opponents. They have played their best ball against the best competition.
And they had such a tough schedule to start out. You're talking about Iowa State, Eastern Washington,
at Cal
Poly, which probably turned out to be an easier game than we thought. Illinois State and NDSU both on the road. Yeah. Illinois State and NDSU, by the way, were pretty good last year and are pretty good this year, right? So they actually survived that. That was the key for them, is to survive that early schedule, perhaps find their quarterback situation, which they did. Yep. And it's actually probably worked out to plan.
Now, there's a running back that did not play in the first matchup. That's Tyvis Smith, who has come out of nowhere over the last 5 weeks. He's at the minimum rushing for 140 yards a game. He went for 209 Saturday night. That combination now with Smith and Bailey in the backfield, boy, that's been impossible for teams to stop.
Right, and like Bailey, he's just a big guy.
He's a load, too.
He's a load, too. I know David Johnson, thank you. Last year, 6'3", 240. Tyvis Smith, 6'3", 224. So he's not quite as heavy as David Johnson, but he's got that same look.
How much has the Bison defense, in your estimation, improved from the first game against UNI to try and stop this quarterback run play that still gave them problems against USD and against Indiana State?
Well, I think we said it back then, is they needed a better play out of the defensive line. They needed a little more penetration out of the interior and more consistency and more depth. And they've gotten more depth lately. We saw Stanley Jones in on a sack last week. We saw Jared Tuska on the field.
In there too.
It wasn't just garbage time.
Yeah, and not just and Caleb Butler as well has emerged since that first game.
Right, and you got the interior of Schatz and Tangway, of course, but then you got Steidel coming on. So that's going to have to be a big deal. They're going to have to make plays up front. You just can't expect the Bison linebackers, MJ Stumpf and Nick DeLuca, to fill their gaps every time and make a play.
You talk about heavy hitters on defense, and obviously the Bison fans know them. They know Northern Iowa's linebackers. Brett McMakin is one of the best in the country. DeAndre Hall, who moved from corner to safety, was the Missouri Valley Defensive Player of the Year.
He's
tremendous
good.
players, both of them are.
I thought he should have been National Player of the Year.
I did too.
I thought he was that good playing in this tough of a conference.
If you're named Defensive Player of the Year in the Missouri Valley, you should be, theoretically.
And with that schedule, absolutely.
Yeah.
But and he's going to be tough. Now, if the Bison win, and if they throw, you got to be aware of where number 6 is.
That's my next question, because with Easton Stick did not have to throw the ball this past Saturday because the Bison rushing attack was so successful. There's no way NDSU is going to pound it for 250 yards against UNI.
Not on these guys.
Yeah.
They're just too strong and physical up front. You saw that the first time these guys played. They're just they're not only big, but they're pretty physical and quick. And so to try to do that, to run King Frazier up the middle almost on the first play every time they did for a while, I just can't see that happening this time.
I will point out, injuries are a factor. Lance Dunn did not play that first game against UNI. I think, and Chris Kleiman alluded to it as well, he thinks he can be a big factor in this game, just brings another element to that Bison rushing attack.
And he's from Iowa. He's from that same area. He might have a little extra in him.
Austin Kunert left that game, you remember, on that fumble that Carson Wentz had late. He was not in on the game-winning drive, and he's been so good up the middle, I think, at center for NDSU.
The Bison O-line is, as a healthier unit as the season's gone along, has been pretty good.
Robert Rathje, who's the all-conference center for Northern Iowa, he left the game with an ankle injury against Portland State. His status, and obviously we're not going to know until Saturday if he plays against the Bison. He's tremendous, too, up front.
And you just can't discard an injury at center. We've seen that over the years at NDSU. That is the quarterback of the offensive line. That's a big position.
And also Deshaun Dexter, not an injury. He's suspended for the first half of the game. That's because of a targeting penalty he got. He was ejected for the game against PSU. Means he has to sit out the first half. He's a starting linebacker in that great core that Northern Iowa presents. Just curious to see how that materializes.
And he's a playmaker, too. He's an outside linebacker and a playmaker.
How about the 11 a.m. kickoff? Third year in a row NDSU is doing this. Granted, Northern Iowa had to go all the way out to the West Coast, play a late game, got back super late, early Sunday morning, and now an early kickoff. Any factor whatsoever in your mind?
I don't think so. I think these guys, this late in the year, they'll play at midnight. I just don't think it's going to be a big deal. So you get up a couple hours earlier.
I tend to agree with that, especially this for the Bison, third year of them going through it. They'll play the winner of Illinois State and Richmond. That's the other side of the bracket. That's a Friday night game with the Redbirds in the Catbird seat. I think, Jeff, if they're able to get past Richmond, then they'll have an extra day of rest, and knowing one of those two teams has to come to their place. And you know how the first time, those two teams are going to just knock the crap out of one another. I really believe that, though they're going to be really beat up for that semifinal game.
And you're infamous for the stat. Nobody's won the FCS title playing on the road in any game since 2007. 2008. That
was, Richmond was the last team to go and do it on the road, so...
Oh.
They've done
it before.
I don't know if someone's going to buck that trend, but we'll find out what happens. It's going to be a great week. We'll have an early morning for you, of course. The Media Blog pregame show will kick off at 8 a.m. on WDAY.com. Kolpack and Izzo lead you right up to kickoff inside the Dome, 9 to 11. It's NDSU and Northern Iowa, round 2 coming up Saturday in the FCS quarterfinals.